Do you ever wonder what someone is truly capable of when the world isn't watching? The question lingered in the quiet of Pam Bondi's study, the glow of her laptop casting long shadows across the mahogany desk. Outside, the Florida night was, still, the kind of deep quiet that comes only in the hours when even the crickets have gone to sleep. She should have been in bed. Tomorrow would bring another grueling day of meetings, another round of political strategizing. But sleep had become impossible. Not after what she'd just seen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, frozen mid-scroll, as the tweet glared back at her from the screen. Pam Bondi couldn't tell a symphony from a sitcom theme. Changed my mind. It wasn't the first time. She'd been mocked online. In her years as a prosecutor, as Florida's Attorney General, as a Fox News contributor, she'd grown thick skin. But this was different. This wasn't about policy or politics. This was about her, about the part of herself she'd kept locked away for decades, the part that had nothing to do with courtrooms or cable news. The words stung not because they were clever, but because they were so utterly, painfully wrong. She closed the laptop with deliberate slowness, the click of the latch echoing in the silent room. For a long moment, she just sat there, staring at the blank screen, her reflection staring back. A woman in her late 50s, hair perfectly styled, makeup still intact from the evening's fundraiser, but with something raw and unguarded in her eyes. Then, without thinking, she stood and walked down the hallway to the room she rarely entered, the one that held the ghosts of who she used to be. The sheet was thick with dust, the fabric stiff under her fingers as she pulled it away. The piano beneath was older than some of the staff in her office, its dark wood scratched from decades of use, its ivory keys yellowed with age. She ran a hand along the lid, feeling the grooves and imperfections, the physical proof of time passing. When she lifted the fallboard, the scent of old wood and felt hammers filled the air. A smell that instantly transported her back to Mrs. Donatelli's living room, to the sticky Florida afternoons of her childhood, to the girl she'd been, before life had other plans. Her finger pressed middle C, and the note rang out, clear and true despite the years of neglect. The sound vibrated through her, settling deep in her chest, unlocking something she'd thought long buried. Liam Carter, with his viral tweets and his smirking arrogance, had no idea what he'd just awakened. The comedy club was packed, the air thick with the smell of beer and sweat, the stage lights casting harsh shadows across Liam Carter's face as he paced back and forth, working the crowd like a seasoned predator. He was in his element, the microphone a weapon, the laughter his fuel, the audience hanging on his every word. His set had been going well, better than well. The crowd was eating out of his hand, roaring at every jab, every exaggerated gesture, every well-timed pause. Then he saw her. At first he thought he was imagining it. There was no way Pam Bondi would show up to one of his shows, not after the tweet, not after the way it had blown up, the way his followers had run with it, turning his offhand joke into a full-blown internet meme. But no, there she was, sitting. At a corner table, her back straight, her hands folded neatly in front of her, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. The crowd noticed her too. A murmur rippled through the room, heads turning, phones lifting to capture the moment. Liam felt a rush of adrenaline. This was gold. "Wow, folks, we've got a special guest tonight," he drawled, pausing for effect, letting the anticipation build. The audience tittered, sensing blood in the water. Apparently, someone didn't get enough of me on Twitter. Laughter erupted. Louder this time, more aggressive. A few people whooped, egging him on. Pam didn't react. She just sat there, perfectly still, her fingers tapping the edge of her glass in a slow, steady rhythm. It was unnerving, the way she didn't rise to the bait, the way she seemed utterly unfazed by the energy in the room. Liam couldn't resist pushing further. "Tell me, Pam," he said, leaning into the mic, his voice dripping with faux concern. "You here to finally learn what real art sounds like? Or did you just miss me?" The room exploded. People howled, clapped, stamped their feet. This was what they came for. The clash, the drama, the public takedown. But Pam didn't flinch. She didn't scowl or storm out. Instead, she set her glass down with deliberate care, stood, and began walking toward the stage. The crowd fell silent. Even Liam faltered, thrown off by her calm, by the way she moved, not with anger, not with haste, but with a quiet, terrifying certainty. Then she spoke, her voice so soft it barely carried over the hushed room, but every word landed like a hammer. You talk a lot about art, Liam, but have you ever actually felt it? Before he could respond, she turned to the club owner, who was hovering near the sound booth, his face pale. Is the piano tuned? The man blinked. Yeah, but... Pam was already moving toward the battered upright tucked in the shadows near the stage. The crowd held its breath as she sat, adjusted the bench, and let her hands hover over the keys. No sheet music, no introduction, just silence. Then she began to play. The first notes were soft, tentative, as if feeling their way through the dark. Then the storm broke. Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor wasn't just a piece of music, it was a force of nature, a tidal wave of emotion and technical brilliance. Pam's hands moved with a precision that bordered on violence, her fingers flying across the keys, weaving between thunderous bass notes and aching, delicate highs. The music swelled, filling the club, pressing against the walls, vibrating in the chests of everyone listening. No one breathed. No one moved. Liam stood frozen at the edge of the stage, his mouth slightly open, his earlier bravado gone. He wasn't a musician, but even he could recognize mastery when he heard it. This wasn't just playing. This was transcendence. Pam's eyes were closed, her body swaying slightly, as if the music were pulling her under, as if she were disappearing into some private world where nothing else existed. There was no audience here, no mockery, no politics, just the music and the decades of feelings she'd poured into it. The piece built to its climax, the notes crashing like waves, each one more powerful than the last. Then, suddenly, it was over. The final chord hung in the air, trembling, before fading into silence. For a heartbeat, no one reacted. Then, as if waking from a trance, the audience erupted, not in the raucous laughter of before, but in genuine, thunderous applause. People stood, clapping, some with tears in their eyes. A few even whistled, their voices cutting through the noise. Pam didn't bow. She didn't smile. She simply stood, smoothed her dress, and stepped away from the piano. As she walked back to her seat, the crowd parted for her, their earlier jeers replaced with something like reverence. She didn't look at Liam. She didn't wait for a reaction. She just picked up her purse and walked out, leaving the room and Liam stunned in her wake. By morning, the video was everywhere. Not the clipped, out-of-context kind that usually went viral, but the full, unedited performance, shot from multiple angles by audience members who'd been too mesmerized to look away. Comments poured in by the thousands. That wasn't just playing. That was living the music. I've never been so humbled in my life. Who is this woman? Musicians weighed in, dissecting her technique, her phrasing, the sheer emotional weight of her performance. Critics who'd spent years dismissing her as a political hack suddenly praised her artistic depth. Even some of her staunchest opponents admitted grudgingly that they'd misjudged her. Liam, to his credit, didn't try to spin it. He didn't make another joke. He just posted a single tweet, "I was wrong. Full stop." Pam didn't respond. She didn't give interviews. She didn't capitalize on the moment. She just went back to her life, back to the quiet, the work, the piano in the guest room that no longer sat under a sheet. But something had shifted. The world had seen a side of her it never knew existed. And in that moment, she'd reminded everyone of a simple, brutal truth. People are always more than the boxes we put them in. Now, I want to ask you, have you ever underestimated someone, only to be completely stunned by who they really are? Drop your stories in the comments. Let's celebrate the moments that remind us to look deeper. And if this resonated with you, share it. Because the world could use more reminders that grace speaks louder than noise. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and never assume you know the whole story.